Behind the bright smiles and carefully written lines, there's always a hidden chaos that holds our eyes in place. When the stars slip off script, emotions erupt, and sometimes it's the messiest moments that make television unforgettable. This is where late-night shows truly catch fire, not because of the lights, but because of the raw, unexpected honesty no one could rehearse. A spontaneous kiss, an awkward laugh, or a glance at the wrong time, all become part of an unspoken legacy that defines television. And in those moments, we don't just watch, we feel something real. Because sometimes, even a moment of awkwardness can become legendary. That night, Drew Barrymore entered the stage like a gust of wind, smiling, carefree, carrying a spark of mischief no one saw coming. As David Letterman was about to greet the audience, Drew leaned in with a playful glint in her eye and asked, "David, do you want me to dance?" Cheers erupted like waves across the studio. And then, to everyone's shock, Drew stepped right onto the host's desk. Without hesitation, she raised her arms, swayed her hips, dancing like there was no audience, no cameras, just one man and a blazing sense of freedom. David Letterman was stunned, his eyes wide, hands still on the desk, as if trying to process what just happened. But it didn't stop there. Drew bent down, swiftly lifted her shirt, flashing him for a second. The entire studio nearly exploded, and like a perfect finale, she planted a light kiss on David's cheek, then returned to her seat, leaving Letterman dazed and speechless. But not all unscripted moments are fiery. Some are gentle, awkward, and shatter a host's heart into fragile little pieces. Nicole Kidman entered Jimmy Fallon's studio with shy but determined eyes. As Jimmy was telling an old story, Nicole suddenly interrupted, "I remember, I actually liked you." Jimmy froze. A deafening silence blanketed the studio. He blinked, blushed, then looked down at the desk like he wished to disappear. Nicole laughed, covered her face with her hand, and continued, "I thought it was a date. I even went to your apartment." Jimmy jumped up in shock, yelling, "What? You thought it was a date?" The crowd burst into laughter, but in his eyes, there was a flicker of confusion, a touch of regret, like he'd just missed something that could have been. Maybe in the simplest moments, we lose the biggest chances. There was no music cue, no script prompting it. But Andrew Garfield created one of the most unbelievable moments in late-night history, when Steven Colbert jokingly asked, "You're comfortable kissing another man?" Andrew smiled and nodded with rare ease. "I don't even understand why that's a question." And then, as if the air shifted, he leaned toward Steven. A subtle tilt, an energized gaze, and in an electric moment, the two men kissed to thunderous applause from the audience. But it didn't end there. Andrew came back for more. The second kiss was deeper, more natural, and astonishingly, was met with cheers like a declaration of emotional freedom. Andrew didn't just break a gender boundary. He shattered traditional television molds with one sincere, confident kiss. From a young actor to a regal lady, the stage barely had time to cool before Dame Helen Mirren entered. Steven Colbert stood up, arms open, welcoming her like true royalty. But she didn't shake hands, didn't bow. She pulled him in and kissed him, full on the lips, in front of millions watching live. Colbert froze, clutching his chest like he'd been struck by a lightning bolt of affection. Helen walked to the guest chair with proud grace, even waving like she'd just granted a royal favor. When asked why, She simply smiled. "I've been dreaming of doing that for 15 years." And in that moment, the room understood. This wasn't just a joke. It was a peak moment of feminine power and joyful defiance. In a matter of seconds, Helen turned a talk show into her personal stage, commanding every breath and every glance. She didn't enter as a guest. She entered as if the stage itself had been built for her. And with one unforgettable kiss, Helen tilted the entire evening in her favor. No preamble, no invitation. Sally Field walked straight up to Colbert and kissed him as she entered the stage. It was a kiss with weight, not just for the surprise, but for the gaze she gave him after. A look that said, "I did that, so what?" Colbert stumbled back to his desk like he'd been drained, while Sally sat down like nothing had happened. She lightly tapped his shoulder and smiled. "Shall we begin now?" She carried no crown, yet every gesture held more command than any symbol of royalty. That moment wasn't just a stunt, it was a declaration that women at any age can own the moment. And Sally, with effortless grace, silenced the room with a kiss that needed no permission. The way she walked, spoke, and sparked laughter from Colbert felt like a quiet monologue. No need to shout, no need to rebel, just the calm confidence of someone who knows her worth. Sally Field wasn't trying to shock anyone. She was simply being herself. And that was more than enough to command the spotlight. Miley Cyrus sat across from Paul McCartney with a look that hinted she was about to stir something up. Arms folded, she suddenly asked, "What is it people fear about women's breasts? It's the nipple, right?" Paul chuckled nervously, but said nothing. Then, in a heartbeat, Miley flung open her jacket. Underneath were two glittering star-shaped pasties. She raised her arms and declared, "I'm showing my boobs, and no one has a problem because the nipples are covered." The audience erupted, part in shock, part in resonance. Miley didn't yell or protest. She simply pressed a finger into pop culture's most uncomfortable wound. Why are men's bodies free, but women's are not? Paul laughed awkwardly, shielding his face, trying to move the show along. But everyone could see, in that moment, Miley was the one leading. If this video moved you, hit like and subscribe. Tom Cruise didn't need a script to make a moment unforgettable. He just needed to be himself, and a little in love. During his appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Tom famously jumped on the couch, punched the floor, and shouted with joy as he talked about Katie Holmes. No one, not even Oprah, knew what was happening. But that lack of control, that boyish sincerity, turned a regular interview into a defining moment of television. He wasn't trying to be wild, he simply couldn't hide how he felt. And in that instant, Tom stepped out of his roles and into his truest self, in front of millions. What made it even more iconic wasn't just the gesture, but the unfiltered purity of it, as if he wasn't acting, just living. What started as a harmless game, passing a tissue by mouth, quickly became the most awkwardly delightful disaster on live TV. Rebecca Romijn grinned, holding the tiny napkin between her lips, eyes teasing Conan. "Ready?" she whispered, leaning in. Conan gaped, unable to breathe from laughter, but leaned forward anyway. The tissue passed from Rebecca to Conan, then Conan to Andy Richter. But on the way back, Rebecca dropped it. Their lips nearly touched. The room fell silent. Conan recoiled, flailing like he'd just dodged an accidental on-air kiss. And just like that, a silly game became a legendary burst of unscripted chaos. For Rebecca, it was playful mischief. But for Conan, each second was a desperate attempt to maintain his composure on live television. Kat and Beth started off with a harmless banter, teasing Conan for fun, but after one accidental slip, "I think I touched your boob," everything went hilariously downhill. Conan gasped and demanded a replay. "I didn't see it! Roll it back!" he yelled. The audience lost it as the moment played again on screen, in slow motion, unmistakable, and absurdly funny. Kat and Beth couldn't stop laughing. Conan stood up, pointing frantically like he was watching a courtroom drama. And amidst the riot of laughter, one truth rang clear. Sometimes awkwardness and clumsiness are the purest forms of comedy. Kat is known for her easy charm, while Beth brings an unpredictable energy. And together, they became a chaotic, irresistible duo. They didn't just create laughter, they unleashed a contagious energy, the kind that made viewers feel they were witnessing something unrepeatable, a moment of shared embarrassment, humor, and pure living chaos. Meryl Streep never needed to do anything dramatic to create an unforgettable moment. During a talk show with Mark Ruffalo, while both were casually chatting, Mark made a lighthearted joke about age and how Meryl's roles had changed over the years. Instead of reacting sharply, Meryl simply smiled, leaned in, and gently cupped Mark's face with both hands. Her eyes were both sweet and subtly cutting, and for a second, Mark seemed frozen in place. Then she whispered, "Sometimes change is a good thing, Mark." The whole room didn't laugh or gasp. It held its breath. Because what just happened wasn't noise, but grace with gravity. Meryl didn't shout. She didn't perform. She merely existed in full command. She wasn't just reminding Mark Ruffalo. She was reminding the world that elegance doesn't shout. It commands. Meryl didn't need to grab the mic. Every eye in the room already belonged to her the moment she smiled. And perhaps that's her greatest strength, a soft, undeniable power that bends the space around her without breaking it. With just one look, one gesture, she redefined what it means to own a stage. Jennifer Lawrence is known for her raw humor and unfiltered charm, but no one expected that a fall at the Oscars would elevate her to icon status. As she walked up the stairs to accept her award, she tripped and fell flat, in front of millions around the world. But instead of shrinking away, she stood, smiled, and poked fun at herself during her acceptance speech. No excuses, no pretenses, just grace in vulnerability. That fall didn't break her image. It made it human, and it made us love her all the more. Even in what seemed like a public failure, she won the hearts of the audience, not by being flawless, but by being real. And maybe that's exactly why we remember her so vividly, because she reminded us that even the brightest stars can stumble, and it's how they rise that makes them unforgettable. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unscripted moments. No one expected an actress like Allison Janney to make the audience scream with just a face pull. But that's exactly what happened. While talking, she suddenly pointed at Graham Norton's face and said, "You'd look better if you lifted it like this." Then she walked over, placed her hands on his cheeks, pulled his skin back, and kissed him. No one quite understood what just happened, but everyone clapped and laughed. Allison didn't break the moment. She seized it. With sparkling eyes and a voice cold as ice, she created a moment no acting class could teach, a kind of unscripted brilliance that needed no explanation. That moment didn't just stun Graham Norton. It made everyone in the room realize that allure sometimes doesn't come from words, but from purposeful surprise. Allison didn't just seize the stage. She redefined it on her own terms. Paul Rudd, known for his ageless smile and gentle demeanor, took the stage and left the audience breathless. He walked out calmly, casually. Then, without warning, he strode up to Helen Hunt and kissed her on the lips. Helen blushed, laughing, and instinctively wiped his mouth with a tissue. No one quite knew what had just happened, but in that moment, Paul was no longer the charming prankster. He was a man who seized the moment and made it eternal. It wasn't a stunt. It was so natural, it felt inevitable. Paul needed no script, no context, just a moment to act, and that was enough to carve his name into the history of unforgettable late-night appearances. That moment served as a reminder. Among thousands of meticulously produced appearances, it's often the unplanned, emotionally raw gesture that moves us most. When Jimmy Fallon went head-to-head with Chris Hemsworth in a water cannon duel, no one expected it to become one of the wildest wet battles on late-night TV. Jimmy squinted, aimed, and fired. Water exploded. Chris screamed, hair drenched, shirt clinging tight. The audience screamed as if watching an action comedy. But Chris fought back, grabbing a full glass and soaking Jimmy in return. It wasn't just a game, it was a masculine but hilariously childish war. And that boyish chaos made these Hollywood giants feel more relatable than ever. There was no winner in that water war, only an audience that gained everything, watching two superstars shed their glamour and return to boyish mischief under the lights. For a few minutes, they weren't stars. They were friends, soaked and laughing, so genuinely themselves that the audience felt just a bit closer to their otherwise distant world. Salma Hayek didn't need music to make an entrance. A glance and a hair flip were enough to silence the room. When Jimmy Fallon nervously asked about her bikini photos, Salma didn't answer. She stood, moved to center stage, and started swaying to an imaginary beat. She invited Jimmy to join, making him pose like he was on a magazine cover. He froze awkwardly, stiff as a board. Salma laughed. "Relax, feel the rhythm." And then she guided the entire room with pure presence. No real music, no props, just fiery, magnetic confidence. Salma wasn't just an actress, she was the conductor of emotional frequency. Every movement she made seemed to recalibrate the audience's heartbeat, making them laugh, gasp, and fall silent without knowing why. Salma didn't need to shout or deliver iconic lines. She just stood there, and the world seemed to lean toward her. Her presence didn't just stir the stage. It left behind a haunting resonance. Lady Gaga isn't just a singer, she's the embodiment of the unpredictable. During one appearance, without any special effects or dramatic lines, she stepped onto the stage in a dress made entirely of raw meat. No one could speak. But in that very moment, with a steady gaze into the camera and confident steps, she delivered a statement louder than words. Gaga didn't need to cause a scandal. She became the definition of deliberate disruption. She doesn't enter a stage to please. She walks in to shake boundaries. The meat dress wasn't just a shock piece. It was a statement about owning one's image, about rebelling against what femininity is supposed to look like. She didn't need to scream. Her presence alone froze the world. Will Smith was once Hollywood's golden boy, until a moment that stunned the entire world. On the Oscars stage, in front of millions watching live, he walked up, slapped Chris Rock, and calmly returned to his seat. Explanations came later, but that moment was instantly etched into history. It wasn't admirable, but it proved one thing. Even the most polished broadcasts can be thrown off script with a single act. But what made that moment legendary wasn't just the slap. It was the silence that followed. The stiff air, Chris Rock's hollow stare, and the robotic applause that continued regardless. It was a moment both unacceptable and inescapable. When Conan O'Brien welcomed Famke Janssen to his talk show, no one expected a small exchange would ignite the entire studio. During their chat, Conan casually made a remark about Famke's appearance after turning 50, a question that could have caused discomfort. But instead of recoiling, Famke tilted her head, smiled, and said, "You should try being my age sometime." The audience erupted in laughter, not just for the wit, but for the quiet strength behind her words. Conan turned red, then stood up and apologized, a rare gesture on live television. In that moment, the power shifted. Famke didn't need to be loud or confrontational. Her composed confidence transformed the room. And Conan, usually the spotlight, gracefully stepped back, letting his guest's brilliance lead the scene. Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny were once the embodiment of on-screen tension, and perhaps off-screen too. In a talk show clip that's now legendary, the host teased rumors of their real love becoming real. David laughed, but Gillian just glanced sideways, raised an eyebrow, and said, "If I told the truth, he'd blush on live TV." And he did. The room burst into laughter. But in the quiet that followed, David looked at her and said, "We've been through more than people know." No confirmation, no denial, just one gaze exchanged that said everything. In that moment, the line between fiction and reality blurred, and television caught something rare. Two people who didn't need a script, to be honest, even in silence. Craig Ferguson and Amanda Peet delivered a moment so quirky and charming, no writer could have planned it. When Craig jokingly asked if he could smell her again, the audience laughed. But Amanda flipped the script. She stepped up, leaned in toward Craig's neck, took a long, dramatic sniff, and exclaimed, "Oh, wow. That's unexpected." The crowd erupted, not just from surprise, but from Amanda's witty and playful way of turning the moment on its head. Craig stumbled back in mock shock, joking that she'd knocked him out with a counter-sniff. In that brief exchange, the line between tease and truth blurred, and all anyone saw were two humans genuinely connecting, creating yet another unforgettable, unscripted television moment. Late-night television isn't where we find perfection. It's where raw emotions quietly unfold. When the script disappears, the real people emerge. They trip, they laugh, they fall silent, and somehow, we remember them for it. The stars in this video didn't try to shine. They simply showed up as themselves, and that truth lit up the screen like nothing else could. If you've ever smiled, held your breath, or felt something real during moments like these, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unscripted truths to come.